Are you stuck in the same old routine at work? Do you find yourself hitting a creative wall, unable to see beyond your current perspective? It's time to break free and unlock the power of fresh perspectives. David Gouthro back with another episode of Discover Fresh Perspectives. Today, I'm here with Sarah McVanel. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you, David. Can't wait to have a fresh perspective with you, my friend.
Now, Sarah, you are I think a well-recognized expert on recognition.
I hope I'm recognized on recognition. That would be so awkward. Yeah.
And so, Sarah, one of the things I was wondering, has this been sort of a life path of yours, or how and when did you come to the conclusion that recognition was something that was very important, and that in fact it's something that you could help people out with?
You're already living up to your name of your podcast, Fresh Perspectives. You know, of all the podcasts, nobody's ever asked that. And there is exactly a moment that I remember. It was grade 1. And one of the kids in my class fell down, scraped all the skin off their knees. And I went, oh no, are you okay? And everybody else was laughing. And I remember going home and talking to my mom, my lovely mother, about why do kids laugh at other kids when they hurt themselves? And she said, I know, I don't understand that either. And then the very next time that happened to me, it's grade 1. I was running in slippery shoes. I fell, skinned my knee, broke the 2 front teeth out of my face, and everybody was laughing. And so I felt embarrassed. And it occurred to me, wow, I must be a different kind of animal because everybody else is laughing and I'm not laughing. So I actually think that has to do with how I was just hardwired to be a recognition expert, because I just feel so deeply. And it's like, you know what? This person doesn't need to be laughed at. They need to be nurtured and cared for and supported and valued and not feel bad.
So you've been doing this for at least 10 years.
Yes, yes, absolutely. I'm in my 40s now, so that's
oh my gosh, who would have guessed? I certainly would have, and if I did, I wouldn't have said so. So because that wouldn't have been recognizing appropriately. So usually in these conversations, it triggers some thoughts of my own, and I remember it was in grade 9, and I remember I was sitting at the back of a particular row. And the teacher handed out the marks for I can't remember what subject it was. And the fellow who got the highest mark was a fellow by the name of Glenson Carson. This is coming back now. And I ran up to the front and said, congratulations, that's fabulous. I just didn't even think about it. And then the teacher said, and I just thinking about it now, he said, see what he just did? That's what we need to be doing more of, and be happy for people's success. So that thought was just triggered by your grade 1 thought. So
I'm not surprised you did that, my friend. That is who you are, how I've always known you to be. You are the biggest champion for other people, and you celebrate their success then probably more than your own. And that's so kind, and that's just who you are, which I love. I love that about you. Mm-hmm.
Well, just let me take a moment to go, good for me. Good for me. No, I'm just kidding. So Sarah,
don't just kid. True. Self-recognition is an important of recognition for everybody. So I love that you said that. Yes.
Yeah, I tend to do it in private in front of a mirror. But another thing I'm curious about, Sarah. We'll talk more about what you do around recognition. But no, I'll ask you a question. Does it take more time to recognize than not? I mean, how much time are we talking about, for crying out loud, for someone to recognize what someone else has done, regardless of the scale of what they've just done? How much time does that really take?
Well, let me ask you, my friend, if you could receive one form of recognition for the rest of your life, whether it was a podcast guest, your daughter, your wife, your colleagues, your clients, your neighbors, what form of recognition do you most universally value?
Money. No,
I knew you were going to joke to say that.
No, I think just acknowledgement. Right. And I'll tell you why. I remember this bringing back a whole pile of memories. So I was working for Apple Canada at the time. And I know that we were having a retreat that I'd helped organize. It was at the University of Waterloo and their residence. And at the time, Apple had a bunch of different values awards, and they gave out these values awards. And it was this certificate for one particular value. I can't remember what it was, but I remember that's the first time someone had said anything. And what went through my mind, I was kind of ashamed at the time to think this was about blank time, right? Because there had been nothing up to that point, and even just a simple acknowledgement. It didn't have to be great, just for doing something, just for doing the job periodically. So I think just that acknowledgement of being that it was noticed and appreciated. And it's not to give me a pat on the back, but to know that the extra effort I was putting in was, I hate to say that it's a reward on effort, a return on effort, but if something, just acknowledging something, if for the rest of my life, that will be fine. And not for anything in particular, just a tiny little thing or something as simple as a thank you. Like I was driving into the park for my walk today, and there were 3 big camper vans coming out. And the first 2, and I pulled over to the side so they'd have lots of room to get out. The first 2 people waved, and the last one just didn't do a thing. And it wasn't like I needed that, but I thought, well, those 2 acknowledged that I put some effort into making their job easier, and this person didn't. So I'm feeling kind of embarrassed to say that, but it's just the acknowledgement. If I was to answer your question.
Don't be embarrassed. I have to say, listeners, can you relate to that? That, you do something nice, you let them in, and then the person doesn't wave. You're like, well, who do you think you are? And all of a sudden our goodwill gesture feels like we've been taken advantage of. So I appreciate that context, because to answer your question about, does it take any more work? Is it actually more effort? You just simply said it was a wave. All you wanted was a wave or a thank you. Or if you were, when you were working at Apple, if somebody had said, you make a difference here, insert reason. That's all you needed. Often I say to people at the end of a keynote, or while I'm in a keynote and we're talking about the most preferred form of recognition, 95% of people say, tell me thank you. So I'll say, by the way, would you like a hot tip? Anyone here have email? Of course, everyone does. Say, how many of you love it? No hands go up. Like, well, here's a way to make somebody want to answer your email. Not only say thank you, put a compliment chaser. Thank you for, and then whatever it is that you want them to do more of, what gets appreciated gets repeated. So if you want them to get back to you in a timely fashion, say thank you for your prompt reply. If you want them to have innovative ideas, say thank you for always having cool new ideas. If you want people to keep being nice, you could say thank you for being the nicest person in the office, bracket, don't tell anybody I gave you that title, end bracket. You could. Thank you for always making me laugh. Thank you for, so generously inviting me onto your podcast. Whatever that thing is, it takes how many seconds to put a thank you, or verbally, or to write it in an email, or to write it in a text, and then to add a few extra words so that it's personal and sincere. Man, that's a lot less effort than putting on an award ceremony, don't you think?
Sure. Yeah, for sure. So the principle that I'm getting out of that is doing something a little bit extra. And again, it makes me remember back to when email was less of a thing. And one of our clients was a very large computer company. And I remember chatting with some folks about how, yes, this comes in the perceived effort. So it takes more effort to add that extra piece you were just talking about. But they were talking about a different kind of effort. They said, you know what, for someone just to send me an email, it's just kind of a throwaway, because we have the technology, it's easy to do. That something written on a card or in a note was worth 10 or 20 times perceived more because of the effort it put into that. So if it's perceived as being effortless, it is not considered. It doesn't have the same impact as when the little bit extra is done. Now, you've talked a little bit of extra about what for and why, and that takes extra effort to do that. But it's, how much effort did someone put in to acknowledging this? So if it doesn't take much longer, Sarah, what are some of the reasons why I think people don't do it more frequently? And what you say makes perfect sense. And it's easy. Why don't people do it more frequently?
Well, let me ask you, my friend, in your experience, when people have been miserly with their compliments or they've not done it versus people that you notice, such as you, who do it very easily, do you notice any patterns?
I don't notice so much patterns as my hypothesis
Mm-hmm.
is that it's kind of like you only have so many compliments to give in your life. And once you've
Mm.
given them all out, there's nothing left.
People are looking at a scarcity mentality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that and then how do I be fair with it? So if I say this to person A, but not to person, D, what are the optics of that? And again, I think back to my experience at Apple, where I'd be very careful about who I wanted to go to lunch with, just because we happen to be friends. But what are the optics saying if I go with this person, but not with that person? So there's that
Yeah.
fear or concern about how other people are going to perceive it. So I think that's one of the barriers to giving it out more freely.
I love that you're asking this question because it actually is one of the most common questions that I get is actually about the deepest fear that people have, and that is that it's not going to be sincere. Also, commonly is how do I make sure I don't play favorites? How to make sure that it lands properly? How do I make sure that I don't perhaps I used to be how to that I offend somebody with what I compliment, and now it is how am I making sure that I'm not inappropriate? People are also worried that, what if I compliment somebody and they perceive it as being disrespectful or so that we get really up in our own head, particularly given that how sensitive we are. We don't want to be canceled, and I keep saying to folks, okay, so I completely understand that we have to be self-aware. Self-awareness, we're self-aware. Fantastic. Let's not go to analysis paralysis. There is such a thing as being overly concerned. When your attention is designed to make sure the other person feels better. It's not my own ego. Like if I do this, then the person's going to give me more work. That's not a true compliment. When it's not, I want to acknowledge that person because they're more attractive. Yes, probably we will see through that. There's probably something inappropriate there. When it is a genuine acknowledgement of effort, you use the word effort, genuine acknowledgement of impact, that's very quantifiable. Thank you so much for getting every single report in on time the entire time you've worked for me. I can't tell you how grateful I am that how accountable you are. Like literally that's quantifiable. So if you think, "Oh gosh, but it wasn't timely. This person's handed in their report every day, every week on time for 3 months." Well, my window's gone. No, this is not a Seinfeld episode. No, now is the perfect time. Best time to plant a tree 20 years ago. Next best time right now. So plant a compliment right now. And let's say the person goes, their reaction is, well, it's the first time I've been acknowledged. Or really, you think it's a good, I'm just doing my job. That's data. That's relationship data. Recognition is relational currency. Rewards are transactional. Rewards like getting the award at Apple is transactional currency. Here's an award, David. Keep doing the thing that this award's about. What you said was, I wanted to be acknowledged for the thing that I've been doing that made me worthy of that award all along. It's like, it would have been nice if somebody had mentioned that beforehand. Let's not let somebody's greatness be the best kept secret from them and everybody else. So to overly worry about all the negative ramifications. I mean, we can worry about everything and never do anything. We worry about, oh my God, I could get hurt if I leave my house, then we'd never leave our house. If we worry about everything we say to people, then we'll never build a connection with people. So the good news is recognition is one of the safest areas that we can connect on. And every person needs to matter to somebody else. There isn't a single person I've ever met. And I ask every audience as a speaker, do you know, no joke, in your life, have you ever met a single person who doesn't need to know that they matter to somebody else? I've yet to have somebody who says, because probably nobody knows a psychopath. No, but in all seriousness, it's a human need. So anyone who's listening to this, if they're worried about recognizing, it may come across as favoritism, insincere, not timely. What if somebody takes offense? Your intention is pure. And if somebody takes offense, you could say, you know what, it came across not quite as how I intended. Can I have a redo? Or you say, you know what, I just genuinely want to make sure that you hear what I value. More often than not, it's not that people will be offended. It's that they won't be able to take a compliment. So that's your sign that we need to be doing more complimenting. And that's okay. You get another go in the next breath.
I use an activity called the electronic maze that a group has to figure out how to get across without setting off any alarms. Mm-hmm. And what I've experienced is that, and I asked them to do it in silence, which doesn't mean you can't recognize, right? So in most cases, they don't do any recognition until one person has actually succeeded. I said, well, do you ever find that you're involved in projects that from start to finish, it could be years. You're going to wait years to acknowledge progress that, why not every time someone learns something differently, help someone out? That's worth acknowledging or rewarding. And I've had the conversation where people said, well, if we reward everything, pretty soon it's going to lose its value. And I said, so has anyone ever worked in an organization where there was a concern about overdoing it?
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, no, I guess not. But that's one of the fears. So I have at least two more questions. So one of them, I've heard you talk about the difference between reward and recognition. Could you just explain those two? And it makes me think about this Apple thing, because kind of like the reward in effect was one time I got a trip to go to Europe. Another time I got this plaque. And those to me felt like rewards more so than recognition. So if you could maybe talk about both of those, Sarah, that'd be great.
Sure. We often use them interchangeably. So I'm so glad we're talking about this. Rewards versus recognition. Rewards is transactional currency. It's extrinsically validating that you are doing something according to what is expected of you. So if, let's say, you've led a project, you and your project team, because you successfully met all the deliverables, you're being rewarded. You receive a values award and you've been nominated, that they vetted it, selected you, and you're getting it. So somebody outside of you decides that you get it. The challenging thing is all the things that built up to that award, we had an opportunity to build relational currency all along, which is recognition. Because no doubt all the things that you did to earn that award, or all the things that that project team did to get that over the mark on time and go through all the obstacles, were things that they deeply value. And that taps into our intrinsic motivation, what we're motivated from inside, are what strengths we value, what are our core values. And the great news is, in organizations that value core values, why not reinforce the values that you see demonstrating those behaviors on the road to get there? Because what if, and this is so much of all of what we're talking about here, really, the underpinning for this is learning psychology, behavioralism. And what we know is reinforce what you want. What gets rewarded is what gets reinforced. So what we don't want to do is extinguish the behavior. We don't want people to feel like, you know what, being nice around here, nice, David's finished last. Forget it. I keep being nice to everybody, and people don't seem to value that. So that's it. You know what? I'm not going to be so nice, because apparently, you don't get the jobs, or people criticize you, whatever. That's it. I have an example of that in my work, is that people have been saying for years, you shouldn't talk so much you shouldn't talk in meetings so much. Every single time I look back on that, who gave me that feedback? Men. Now, I'm not saying it was necessarily just a gender thing, but I can't help but look in my more woke eyes and go, I wonder, when I think about those meetings there were some men around the table. Did they strategically use the opportunity to jump in and on top of my idea as soon as I had shared it as a strategic move? Like, was I just not a very good chess player? Why did people have to keep dressing me down outside of the meeting and telling me how to behave in it, or during the meeting telling me that, I was too optimistic and my head was in the clouds? Well, somebody had to feel positive about this place. So what actually I realize is, if I hadn't gone first, we didn't have as brave a conversation. When I took the advice and I took a step back and I just listened, you know what? Not that I was the only one who could have a valuable, way to start the conversation. There's a lot of people who didn't like starting conversations. They're introverted. They need time to process. Maybe they don't know enough about it. Perhaps they don't feel bold and assertive. So, I realized that what they were doing is extinguishing a valuable contribution that I had to make. So I did less of what was working to try to fit in with what was expected. And so this is the important thing I invite people to think about when it comes to rewards and recognition. What you extrinsically reinforce and how you do that is a signpost to everyone. This is the stuff that matters here. And by the way, there's almost always somebody in a position of authority by title or by gifted responsibilities, such as a working group who vets all of the criteria to win those awards. There is some kind of power differential that determines what gets and who gets recognized. There's also a delay. There's also not necessarily specifics about, well, what have you done between the last award ceremony and this one for all the things? We've missed all those opportunities. Where I'm a recognition expert, which doesn't mean to say we don't do rewards. We need to do them both well. In fact, doing recognition better means we will do rewards better every time. Recognition is every time you build a relational, connective experience through something like thank you, a hand wave, acknowledging something specific, noticing, conscious noticing, like, wow, your project is really progressing despite all of the barriers. What do you think is working? That's a way of recognizing. You're not saying, I think you're the most amazing project manager. You're just simply noticing something that's working. So guess what? You're going to work to prove them right. Recognition is this incredibly powerful way to keep the behaviors that we value going. So if anyone tells you in the future, David, well, I don't think we should be recognizing so much around here because then it's all going to seem fake, I would challenge them to look for an example where there is so many people who feel so valued that they do not need a single acknowledgement left in order for them to achieve well. If anything, they're going to probably look around and realize that people do not even know if they're adding value and that they're contributing and that they're waiting to be appreciated for what they do every day. Soapbox over.
So, so this reminds me of a client that I absolutely love working with. And the CEO sends out a note. He calls it a huddle, partly to focus on how the importance of being accountable. But every single one, he talks about someone or a number of people that have done something to be acknowledged. And he spreads that around, but he does it in such a way that when it comes time to the annual awards or rewards, and someone is called up to the front, nobody is surprised, right? Because all the recognition has been, yes, this makes sense, right? There's been that acknowledgement. So I have what may be a tough question for you. So you can always pretend you have a technology problem, but and had to
I probably
disconnect.
do, so it might not be a hard stretch. Yeah.
So what I'd be interested in, if there is such a thing, when some of your clients talk about what they perceive to be a recognition disaster, and how you actually talk them through that to recontextualize that. I mean, maybe no one had a disaster they come up with, but usually there's people that say, yeah, but this happened to me. So if there's anything that you can think about of that nature, and then how you help them look at it differently, I think that'd be very interesting.
Yeah. So, what I tell them actually is that our brains hardwire emotions and emotional memories much deeper and more vividly than non emotional. So, I'll say something like, it sounds like that was hurtful, or that was frustrating, or that was, so I'll acknowledge the emotion behind it. And they'll usually say yes. And I'll say, so I'm not surprised that it's so easy to recall. That is human nature. What I'm curious about is if you think about the other conversations that you've had over the last day, week, month, have you acknowledged anybody else? And then they may, eyes look up in the air and they'll think, yeah, I guess. Yeah. And I'll say, well, tell me about a few of them. And then they'll come back, but it'll be slower to come back. And I'll say, so it sounds like you had this one really negative experience. And you've just shared that there's a half a dozen positive experience that happened recently. Isn't that fascinating that your brain did not remember all six that you just described? Now I'm curious, do you think you will have a memory that you'll be able to conjure up of those six things? And the next time you're worried about that thing that you remember about how it'll go wrong, now you've paired that memory with these six memories. And then you maybe will have a different data point to evaluate if, in fact, recognition is negative or dangerous in some way. So that's one of the things that I say. If people are really really dead set on not believing that recognition works. Like some people are, I don't have a lot, but sometimes people feel very seriously and they need to be heard, because really what they're saying is, this was super vulnerable. I put myself out there. I was stung. And now I don't want to do it anymore because it feels unsafe. So I have to help them feel safe because it's human nature. It's our human brain, protecting us. But we don't live in caves, so we don't need to be quite so hyper aware, right? So that's one thing that I do. The other way I'll come at it is I'll say, so what else could have happened? And then they'll be very confused. They'll say, so what, I mean, I'm just wondering, you're sharing that this person was really angry at you. And I'm just wondering, could anything else have been happening? And then again, the eyes go up in the head and like, well, I guess we were really, really overwhelmed. Like, okay, well, that would explain the reaction. Anything else? And I'll just, anything else, anything else, anything else. And I'll say, so it sounds like it's very possible that that person did not like that recognition. It's also possible, it sounds like it could have been a stress response. It could have been they were overwhelmed, they were tired. And then I'll usually make a joke like, I know if I'm hangry, my husband does not get the best reaction from me. So again, it's just another way of looking. It's not that it minimizes that their experience of that is their truth, but human brains, memory systems, processing systems, and perception is not the same as cognition because it's two different things. We take in data, we process it, and now what I try to help them do is see, so now you have a mental map that rewarding and or acknowledging people, it doesn't necessarily go well, or it's not safe. What I want to do, and this is a ladder of inference, right? Chris Algaris, which I know I need to pull them back down in the feedback loop, go right back up the ladder with me and explore if there's any other data they missed, so that the next time they're confronted, I can't convince them that recognition. If they've heard me do a keynote or we've done a training session together and they say that to me, I'm not gonna repeat everything I just said. What I need to do is be with them in the discomfort, the pain, the disappointment, the frustration that has been tied to a legitimate recognition gone wrong perception. And it is entirely possible that one of the things they realize is that they were never recognized as a kid, or they were never recognized in their marriage, which is part of what went awry. And it mapped onto some pretty tough life life, what life is kind of mental maps.
So I'm going to give you one more business scenario. Then might be nice to talk about personal relationships, and that's where I've seen when award has been given to some people don't like to be held up in front of their peers to get the big award, and where I've seen it go wrong is where someone is given an award that they know they were part of a team and the team did most of the activity. So I think then when that goes wrong, there's two opportunities. One is to think through it, right, about what happened. And the second is that before actually giving the recognition for something that's going to be public, to really think about it and what the possible ways it could go wrong and try to mitigate against that. I mean, you can't do everything, but usually these things are a pretty big deal. They bring a bunch of people into the room. And also knowing personal preferences, because there's some people that go, yeah, I'll take credit for what the team did, no problem. They won't say that, but they feel that. And then there's others that really want to feel part of it, and they feel embarrassed, and that that the team is going to judge them for taking credit. So, that's another example where looking at how have people perceived what happened and what to do differently next time, as you said. So let's leave.
No, I'm just going to say, I actually have, for anyone who's worried about that, I do have a resource for them. The recognition checklist that's on my website, greatnessmagnified.com. If they go to cool stuff, I'm not sure if you have show notes, David, but we can make sure that gets over to you. And if you don't, people could just go to greatnessmagnified.com, and there's a recognition checklist. And the power of asking people in advance, how do you want to be recognized, is you can literally see, do people prefer individual, team, surprise, planned, private, public? Because if you have a whole bunch of folks who all say private, and they all want planned, and it all needs to be team-based, well, there's your clarity there. And even if you're having a really big, I spoke for one of the really large courier companies, one of our global courier companies, at their President's Awards event about this time last year. And everything was public. In fact, it was broadcasted to all 15,000 carriers across while they were on their routes. And some people said, oh, this is really awkward. This is really uncomfortable for me. And you know what they did is they realized that this is tough. So rather than say, oh, well, we can't give people public recognition, you know what they did? They created a dress rehearsal the same day. Come early, we're going to give everybody an opportunity to come up on stage. You're going to hear what they're going to say, practice walking across, know where you're going to get it. I was like, this is brilliant. Yep. You don't necessarily need to change, because this is the highest level of award. So we don't want to not do that, even though people have different preferences. However, we can be sensitive to making sure it's a positive experience. Great. For other people, you can just ask folks, and you may find that the reason why folks are getting really offended that individuals are getting recognized is because they all really value team-based awards. So guess what? Shift it to team, or have both. We have the the accountability award for an individual, and then we have a team accountability award. So it can be a both and.
But it's about being thoughtful about it. And what was that website again? No, I'm just kidding. I'm going to put it in the program notes, of course. It'll be there for people that want it. So let's move just for a few moments to relationships. So how does this play out in relationships? What advice or guidance do you have? Because most of the people listening probably are in a relationship, or have been in one, or are hoping to be in one, and this could be really useful advice. So what do you have to offer there, Sarah?
Yeah. Oh, it is again, this is why it's so much fun to be interviewed by you, because normally when I'm on corporate podcasts, we never get to this point. So this is super good. I've been married for 25, almost 26 years. I know you've been married for a long time too. So it's not surprising that two very, very longly, that's a new word, married people are curious about that. And it doesn't matter if you're in a formal relationship, like a long-term relationship or not. It's true. Every person, we talked earlier, every single person needs to matter to somebody else. So how do you make sure your partner feel they matter? If you are burnt out, exhausted, and people don't get the best of you, they get the worst of you or the last of you. That's not a way of recognizing them. What do you need to do to turn off your phone at dinner? Like, we have a no phone at the table rule. And so we live very disparate lives, right? My kids are 20 and 18. One's in school. The other one's kind of almost launched. But when we're at the table together, we still have the same rule: no phones, because that may be the only half hour or 15 minutes if we're all in a rush that we spend with each other in a week. So, how much would they feel valued if I took a client call or checked my messages? I could check my messages the rest of the week. They get the best of my 15 minutes, half an hour. And I feel more valued when they do the same thing. In fact, we'll say, we need to put the phones away, not because it's a rule, but because this is how we show respect and we value each other.
So, so then I'm thinking that maybe we should stop our process of flipping a coin to see who gets to have their phone at the table each time. No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's just a tiny example. And I use it because it's what a lot of people can relate to, right? Is there's phones everywhere. I was permanently attached. We feel like we need to be accessible and available always. Um, Whenever all the things that we've talked about in a workplace setting, recognizing what matters to the person. You have the greatest lens to what matters to, if we're talking about this in a romantic relationship standpoint, the things that people get most upset about and they trigger them, and the things that people are the proudest about and they want to share with you, those are the things that they most need to be affirmed for. And I know there's, lots of us have probably been come across, if we haven't already read the book, around the 5 love languages. And so I know my husband's love language is acts of service. That's the number one. My number one is words of affirmation. You're probably not surprised. He knows he needs to acknowledge me, not just do things for me. And when he does something for me, I need to really notice it. So when I come home from a business trip, let's say I've been away for 5 days, he always does a big project. I never expect him to do it. I do not need the kitchen to be repainted while I'm gone, but this is his way of not missing me, being very busy and doing. This is how he shows he loves me. When I come home, do you think the number one thing I want to do is do a kitchen of the walls or the cupboards or the inside of the cupboards, or hear about the new handles or what cleaning supply he had to buy? And he went to Home Depot 6 times, and no disrespect to him, but I literally am so tired. I just want to wash my face, wash my hands, lay down, go to bed, whatever it is. But even if I get home at midnight, he wants to show me the tour. He doesn't want to wait, or he wants me to at least sit and bask in the beauty. And it's great. But I honestly don't have the energy to do that. But I know he needs that. He did it for me. I need to do that. And same with when if I come in, whether I've had a great day, a rough day, whatever, he needs to give me some quality time. And which is another love language, it's my other love language. And he needs to ask me about my day, and he needs to say something nice. He needs to say something like, wow, it sounds like you had a lot to deal with. Not tell me what I should have done differently. Have you ever had that where you suggest to your wife what she could have done differently in her day, how she could have handled that conversation differently, and she doesn't appreciate it?
Only when she asks me.
Yeah, see? There you go. Exactly. Exactly. Because words of affirmation isn't like, oh, I hear you've had a terrible day. Here's how I would have done it differently, because clearly didn't handle it well. No, it's listening and then saying something like, sounds like you've had a really intense day. That is actually a way of recognizing me, because you've just affirmed me.
So one of the things I'm wondering about, Sarah, is if underlying this the activity of engagement is especially in relationships, at minimum requires respect and ideally love. But respect is very important, because it's important for me to acknowledge this person, to recognize them in a way that's going to work for them. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. You can't you can't have recognition without respect. Otherwise, that's where it starts to feel forced and fake. This is where it feels manipulative. If you know your boss treats you like garbage and then all of a sudden comes along and says, you have been doing a very good job and I appreciate your contributions. You'd be like, did you just go on a course? Have you been told you need to, like, have you been given some negative feedback that we don't feel appreciated? Is this because in the engagement survey results, like we tell ourselves all kinds of stories, right? Because it doesn't fit. So same with our partners. If all of a sudden they're like, oh, you look nice. Oh, wow, like that, your day was interesting. And you're like, you have not been respectful to me. And now all of a sudden you're being nice. That's where a fight might break out. Oh, now you're nice to me. So you're absolutely right. This is recognition is a form of respect. And when we're respected, we want to recognize. It is so easy because my brand is Frog, forever recognize others' greatness. It's not, I recognize others' greatness when you have time, when you can fit it into your schedule, when you need something. It's forever. And so if you truly deeply care about the people in your life, the people you live in the same community with, the people who live in your house, the people you work with on your team, recognize them and always be curious. Look for the extraordinary that happens in the ordinary because they don't notice it. It's in the everyday for them. And they probably are so humble that they think, oh, it's no big deal. However, when you recognize it, maybe it makes them stop and go, oh, really? Was that so great? And then they keep doing it.
Sarah, this is, I think, a really great place to bring this conversation to a close, although it could go on for hours. And I want to make sure, I have no doubt that people are going to get fresh perspectives or reinforced perspectives they have or make them think about things. We don't want them to drive off the road as they're listening to this. And I would like to thank you very much for your time with us today, Sarah. Thank you so much. And I will put all kinds of contact information in the program notes.
Thank you so much, David. I appreciate you. You're a kind, generous, and warm person that has made my life better. So thank you for being in it.
Well, and the risk of keeping it short, I'd have to say exactly the same back at you, Sarah. So this has been David Gouthro, Discover Fresh Perspectives. I hope you look forward to the next episode where you can listen and get a fresh perspective. Thank you so very much. Subscribe now because on Fresh Perspectives, every episode is an opportunity to explore new horizons and redefine what's achievable.